What's up, guys? It's three-time NFL Pro Bowler, all-decade return specialist, Josh Cribbs. I want to welcome you to the College Sports Connection podcast, where Double A, Alex, and AJ host the Mid-American Conference Best.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the College Sports Connection podcast. I'm your host, Alex the Captain. Joining me as always, AJ the Guru.
What's going on, everybody?
AJ, welcome back. We are now 1 week into the Big Ten Conference play. We're switching gears a little bit, moving to our beloved conference, the Mid-American Conference. I'm excited for tonight.
Yes, finally. We have the 14th. Or excuse me, the 4th, rather. Here,
right?
I've lost track of all time. It hopes it's
We all have.
I don't know what day it is anymore. But yeah, the 4th here coming up next Wednesday. We're starting off some action finally.
Thank you for having us.
The Big Ten, like we said, started. The Mountain West started. I think they start at the same time.
Yeah.
Pac-12 comes back in November. So we're starting to get into the swing of things. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And tonight we are joined by our dear friends from over at the MAC Bandwagon Podcast, a part of HustleBelt, which covers a lot of the Mid-American Conference teams. They do a lot of articles, great stuff over there. So tonight we are welcoming Sam and Zach from over the MAC Bandwagon Podcast. Guys, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, guys, we're excited to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I guess let's just go ahead and dive right in. We have quite a slate kind of prepared in terms of the next 6 weeks for MACtion. It's going to be a crazy ride from start to finish. From week one through the Mid-American Conference Championship in Detroit. Let's just dive right into week one matchups. We've got a couple good ones. Well, first, let's talk about, the division, the projected division winners. The coaches poll came out today. They have Miami, Ohio repeating over in the East, and they are once again picking Toledo to win the West. Has not worked out so well for Toledo the last decade with them picking them. So as a Toledo guy, I'm not a big fan of them picking Toledo. I really wish they would stop that.
Yeah, you brought up Miami of Ohio there. They've had some issues on the team the past couple of days. So, is that going to make an impact? It more than likely will.
Yeah.
I believe 5 players got into some trouble. So, really, so speaking of them, week one, they start off with Ball State. That game's in Oxford. Oxford's a tough place to play. We can dive right into that here. We got myself and Sam, Ball State guys. We're very excited about this. Excited to see Charlie Cardinal back on Twitter. This Twitter game is strong. So really, we brought up Miami of Ohio. Let's get into it. Let's get into that first game. Sam, I'm sorry, it's been a long day. Alex and I got into this last week. We're upset about how the scheduling is on TV. The CBS Sports Network. Not everybody has CBS Sports Network. So, a lot of the games are on that channel this year. So it's really going to be interesting and kind of hard, I think, to watch some of these games, unfortunately. But we do have a few ESPN2, ESPN3 games next week, so that'll be fun to get into.
Before Zach chimes in, I've just got to say, I'm tired of the disrespect Ball State's been getting. I don't know whether you've been following on Twitter or not just football, but the fact that basketball, I don't know whether you saw on Twitter, but Ishmael Al-Amin was also not named as one of the preseason first-team All-Americans. And now in football, they're projecting us 4th in the coaches pool. It just seems like if there's a game that we can prove ourselves that we're not as bad as we are, week one against a very strong Miami, Ohio, who's coming off that MAC championship game, is a game we can make our name known. And I think Miami, Ohio's coming into it a little bit too kind of cocky in a way. They're just feeling themselves on Twitter. I see them post all their enormous amount of MAC championship wins, and I'm like, hey, you still got to go through us week one. You still got to play those 6 weeks, and I don't think it's going to be as easy as they think it is.
Yeah, I hear you there, Sam. And I look at Miami of Ohio, and I think this is going to be a good defense this year. But, I mean, if you talk about a bad matchup for them on week one and talk about a high-powered offense coming in Oxford. I mean, Ball State, there it is right there. I mean, they were the best offense in the conference last year. So I think Miami's defense is good, but I think Ball State's offense can certainly match that. My concern with Miami is I have a lot of issues with their offense, even though Gabbert is back and he was the freshman of the year in the conference last year. They were still 8th in the conference in points, 10th in rushing yards, 9th in passing yards, 10th in total yards. Like, this wasn't a great offense last year, even with Gabbert, being the one of the better young quarterbacks from the conference in recent memory. That kind of worries me, and I think if there's one kind of, I guess, quote unquote upset I could see happening in the first week.
Yeah,
I
you're talking about
think this could
Gabbett
be
there. He threw for 2,400 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 8 picks last year. And only completed 55.4% of his passes. And I didn't realize this until I did some research, but who his brother is kind of made the connection there at that quarterback.
Yeah.
I look on the other side of the ball here. Ball State's quarterback and Drew Pinter. He had a nice year last year. He really did. He comes back, because when I was in Muncie, I came from the Keith Wenning era, the end of Keith Wenning, into Riley Neal. And then there was a couple guys in there. Ozzie Mann was in there, and maybe one or two other guys for a short time. But you come in from a Ball State quarterback perspective, is the past few years, including Riley and Keith, who've had the most success, have been guys who've been able to throw the ball. Yeah. And each of those guys have had weapons down the field. I think that's what Ball State brings back this year as well, along with a strong running game, because they did run the ball extremely well last year. And I know that's been an emphasis here in the offseason for Coach New and the guys.
Well,
I was just going to say before we move on to Ball State, because I could talk Ball State all day, but I know you guys don't want to stay on that. Like, our defense side of the ball is also looking pretty stacked. We got that Sacred Heart transfer and Chris Agyemang, I think I'm saying his name now. We got Azadunma and Bryce Crosby holding down that defense. Like, the only big name on defense we really lost is Jacob White and that linebacker. But other than that, we've got most of our team returning. It just seems like people are undervaluing us like they do every year.
I think you got to look at Caleb Hutley. He had 1,200 yards rushing last year, 12 touchdowns on 248 carries. The dude's a workhorse, and I know the ball will be put on him a lot this year to make the offense successful, and I think they will be.
Well, and I think one of the things for Ball State, right, is the MAC top to bottom is fairly competitive, especially the West Division. I mean, you look at the West Division as a whole, you constantly have teams like Western Michigan, Northern Illinois, Toledo, just constantly in the mix for first place. But you can't sleep on the Eastern Michigans. You can't sleep on the Ball States. Ball State is one of those programs who can be sneaky good. And if you're not watching it, if you're not ready, they're going to jump up and upset you. I mean, you look at Toledo last year. Ball State beat the brakes off of them. I mean, Toledo, they went through their struggles. They went 6-6 last year. That's fine. But Ball State just, when they're on, they can play some really good football. And Coach New, kind of like what AJ was saying, he's got his hands full. But if this is a year to do it in a shortened season. Go win a conference championship. Sure. Why not?
And this is a big year, I think, for Coach New, too, because they brought him in from New Orleans. He was the quarterback's coach for Drew Brees, Ball State guy, but he hasn't had the most success yet. And they gave him a contract extension this year. So, this is a big year for Coach New. He has the right tools to do it. It's just a matter of getting that team to buy in. And I think they will now. Drew Plitt, Hutley, Hall, receiver. But I think they'll just be just fine, especially being a shortened season. They've had plenty of time to prepare. So I think with this time that they've had, I think they've used it wisely, and I think they'll be all right.
Something I do want to point out, looking at the matchup predictor, right now they have Miami, Ohio favored by 63.4% according to ESPN's Football Power Index. That being said, if you go back and you look at November 29th, 2019, Miami, Ohio lost to Ball State 41-27.
But Alex, they did bench their starters in the second half. You got to remember that, because they were I think clinched in the MAC championship, correct? So they were up by like double digits before.
I'm just saying, those players who did go get that win, they know what that feels like, and the ones who are returning understand. All right, these are the things we did. Sure, it was against second string. Some of those second string guys are now the starters. That's something we got to keep in mind as well.
And one other thing I wanted to add, it's not, I guess, specific to this game, but we're talking a lot about Miami here. I was really surprised, quite frankly, when I saw the coach's preseason poll come out today, and I saw Miami picked to win that division. I really was. I think when I look top to bottom, just from a roster, talent standpoint, Buffalo is better than Miami pretty much everywhere. I mean, I don't think a lot of people would disagree with that. So I was really surprised to see Miami picked to win this division. I'm a little bit surprised to see how everyone seems to be, how high everyone seems to be on Miami right now. I'm not sure. I don't know. It just caught me off guard a little bit, I guess.
Sure. No, I'm kind of along that same vein with you. I think that Miami, while they have a solid program, I almost want to say I feel like they lucked into the MAC championship last year. I don't know if they can do the same. We just saw Wisconsin and Nebraska get shut down this weekend. AJ and I were talking about this earlier because of COVID. This isn't a normal season by any means. If anything happens to one of these teams, the season's done for them. The Big Ten gets 9 weeks. The MAC gets 6. That's something too. If you have a key player test positive, they're out for 21 days. That's half the season for them. This is going to be a much different year than anything we've ever seen for the MAC. But I agree with you. I think that Buffalo, top to bottom, just talent-wise, their roster stacks up a lot better than that of Miami. But again, it's the MAC. We're not supposed to know everything that happens in the MAC. That's why it's MACtion. It's just complete chaos. But look,
It can one quick thing. Can the MAC release what coach voted on what? Because I'm curious how Ball State got one vote and how Akron got one first place vote. I'm curious who voted.
I would
voted
imagine.
For Akron?
I would imagine
I'm
that
curious.
that somebody somewhere probably just looked at it and said, "All right, we're gonna vote for our own school." Because let's be honest. I mean, you want to show guys, if you go back to the locker room, you want to be able to tell guys, look, I believe in us. I'm the one who put that vote down. We win this thing. I look like a genius. We don't. Hey, I showed you I believed in you. So I think it's more of a positivity message to your players than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. We go down the line of games going on Wednesday. We briefly touched on their Eastern Michigan. They traveled to Kent and play Kent State at 6 p.m. on ESPN Plus Wednesday. This is one of those games. It's a toss-up game, honestly, because both programs have been relatively down over the past couple of years. I always look back to Eastern, the entrance they had with a sledgehammer trying to break down the wall going onto the field. How bad that turned out to be. But Eastern's one of those teams that when they're good, but when they're bad, they're bad. And you could say the same thing about Kent too. Kent State they look good on the field. Their logos and their helmets look fantastic. But outside of that, it's been relatively low ever since Dre Archer was there.
Yeah. And I will say one thing that I've hit on repeatedly on our podcast. Zach knows me. I'm not the biggest Chris Creighton supporter by any means. And what I've noticed a trend is they can't get it done in the MAC West. They can get it done against non-conference, whether it's Big Ten or whatever Power 5 school. But when it comes to MAC West, outside of, I believe, the 2018 season, they haven't had a top 3 finish for I don't even know how long. So it's the fact that this is a conference-only schedule when you're playing 5 MAC West opponents in your 1 MAC East cross division, and that kind of worries me. And Kansas State's coming off their first ever bowl win in school history. Dustin Crum's coming to his senior year. That's got to be worrying as a Eastern Michigan fan.
I'm kind of on the other side of it from Sam in terms of Eastern Michigan. I actually really like Chris Creighton. I understand where Sam's coming from, but I actually really think he's done some good things there. However, in this particular game, in this particular matchup, I don't think they match up well with Kent State at all. This is a team, Eastern Michigan, that was not good on defense last year at all. I mean, they were 10th in the conference in rushing defense, 9th in points per game, and they lose 3 all-MAC players in their secondary from last year. So, I mean, they're completely rebuilding their secondary. Their linebacking core got decimated from graduation and a couple of transfers. So like this is a team that was already bad on defense, and then they lost tons of talent from that defense. And then you look at, on the other side of on the other sideline with Kent State, you've got Dustin Crum coming back. This is an offense that was really hitting its stride at the end of the year last year. I could really see Kent State being able to take advantage of Eastern Michigan's defense in this game and putting some.
Well, I was going to say, you look at Kent State, their last stretch, right, including their bowl game against Utah State. Kent State won game, but they beat Buffalo 30-27. They beat Ball State 41-38. They beat Eastern at the factory up in Ypsilanti 34-26. And then they took it to Utah State 51-41. You're absolutely right, Zach. This is an offense that was really starting to click, putting up 30-plus points a game, 2 games with over 40 points in the last 4 games. This is an offense that's really doing what they got to do. Eastern Michigan, on the other hand, their offense did some okay things, but like you guys said, when they're playing bad, they're playing bad. They lost to Buffalo last year 43-14. The loss to Kent State was a 1-score game, toss-up game. And then they lost to Pitt, again, 1-score game in their bowl game. When they're playing well, they're beating schools like NIU 45-17, Akron 42-14. Eastern Michigan just has so much hit or miss with what they do as a program. And I think part of that is a lot of coach turnover. I think part of that is a lot of lack of player retention, guys who are like, all right, I'm just going to graduate and be done. I'm not going to redshirt. I'm just going to do my 4 years and get out of here. Players transferring, whatever it may be. I think Eastern's on the right track. I just don't think all the pieces are there yet. I think that this is definitely a game that Kent State wins, and maybe handily, honestly. I think this is a 2-score game for Kent State. I really don't see Eastern coming and playing as well as they could to start the season. But again, who knows? I think that, however, that Kent State does dominate this game. They've got the tools to do it. Like you guys were talking about Crum, he's phenomenal. You can't take anything away from that kid. I really do think that this is Eastern starts the season 0-1. Kent State takes it away in a big fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of those games that it's just going to be interesting to watch from kickoff to the end just to see what happens because there are so many variables that go into it. Alex, you mentioned coach turnover. I don't think any program in the MAC has had more turnover than Akron. We had Jared Pugsley on our program not too long ago, and he talked about, was he there 4 years and had 2 or 3 different coaches?
Yeah, he was there 5 years and he had 3 different coaches.
Yeah, that's what it was. And we go back to last year, and Akron didn't win a ball game. That was a tough one to swallow here. And we go into, they went 0-14 or whatever it is. And but you talked about coach turnover. That's a huge issue there. They've had a new coach last year. We go here to Western. They're coming in with a newer coach after PJ Fleck left for Minnesota. And Western continues to win a few games. They lost in their bowl game in the Surf Pro First Responders bowl game. These bowl game names are getting way out of hand. But they lost in that 23-20 and finished the year 7-6, 5-3 in the conference. So this is a team, this is a time where I think Western can really build on what they had last year. And for Akron, I don't think they can get any worse than what they really were.
I had a thought, and this is the back of my mind. Do you guys think with the schedule? I'm looking at the schedule right now. Akron has enhanced Western Michigan opening up week 1, Ohio, Kent State, Miami, Ohio, Bowling Green, and Buffalo. Besides the Bowling Green game, the question is, do you think Akron gets a win this season?
Bowling Green's the only shot. Bowling Green's the only shot, and even that I think is an outside shot.
Well, I was going to say Bowling Green, when they click, they click. And now they've got their coach is in the system another year. Guys are buying into that. He's starting to get some of his own recruits in. I think that, Akron goes 0-6, and I don't even think it's close.
Guys, I was doing some research, preseason research for our podcast and stuff like that. And one of the things that astounded me when I was looking at Akron, they averaged in MAC conference play last year, they averaged 45 rush yards a game. That is astoundingly bad. That is astounding. 1.7 yards per carry, 45.4 rushing yards per game. I mean, I've never seen a yards per game average that low from a team, from an entire team on offense.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty crazy. So I think Tom Arth was a good hire for them. I think he could be the right guy there, but they're still so far away. I mean, their roster last year was so devoid of talent, and I think it's going to take a while for him to kind of get his guys in there and stock some talent onto that roster. And until then, unfortunately for Akron fans, I think there's gonna be a lot of losses until he has a chance to get a couple of recruits.
Looking at those games from last year, they were shut out twice back to back in Buffalo and Northern Illinois, and then in 3 games they only scored a field goal.
Yeah.
So the lack of offensive production here, we got looking at some of these numbers here, they lost to Central 45-24. Lost to Kent 26-3, lost to Buffalo 21-0, 49-0 Northern Illinois, lost to BG 35-6, lost to Eastern 42-14, lost to Ohio 52-3. So there is just it's going to have to be a complete overhaul of playbooks, recruiting, talent. I don't know if Akron can go through another coaching change, but like we talked about, they did it with Pugsley for 3 years in a row. Or 3 times in 5 years. So, Akron was prominent once with Bowden as their coach. Like, they were competitive. They almost went to Happy Valley and beat Penn State, didn't they? And so
They almost beat Michigan at the Big House too. Like,
yeah. So they're one of those teams that they've got a lot of work to do. And like we talked about a little bit ago, are they going to get that first, or are they going to get that win this year? It's going to be tough. And I might say I don't think so, but as we saw Penn State go down to IU. We've seen crazier things happen in sports.
well, and I think what's interesting too is right now their quarterback Cato Nelson is the primary ball carrier, and I'm looking at looking at the numbers from last year. He was the leading rusher in 4 games last year with rushing yards of 31, 28. 64. Like, that's not going to get it done. I mean, the guy's got a great arm. He's throwing 200 plus. He's got he's got 1 300-yard game. But if your quarterback's your leading rusher and he's only getting 25 yards, that's not going to do it. You can't rely on that. That's not an effective way to win ball games, as evident by their 0-12 season last year.
Exactly. I mean, the quarterback Nelson, he only threw for 1,800 yards. Lee, who's a receiver, was their leading rusher. 179.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the numbers here, these are high school numbers. Like, it doesn't – there's some high schools putting up bigger numbers than this. It's a fact. The leading receiver only had 529 yards, and Laco was the leading tackler with 138, and there's only one interception. Like, that's just across the board. Not good.
I gotta say, as a quick aside, I feel really bad for Cato Nelson because he came into this program – his freshman season, he started as a freshman and took them to the MAC championship game. Imagine that. In 2017, Akron was in the MAC championship game. Think of how fast this program fell. I mean, it's pretty crazy. So, for him to be a freshman starter and lead the team to the MAC championship game his freshman year and then have an 0-12 season as a junior, and now he's coming back as a senior leader for this team, got to feel bad for him. It's he's endured some good, some bad football, and I'd love to be able to see him get a win this year, but like you guys were saying, I don't see it happening.
Yeah. And when you look at Cato over his progression since 2017, his numbers have gotten better. I mean, he completed 53.8% of his passes last year. His yardage was down, but I think that contributes to the talent around him. He came from 2,300 to 1,800. He averaged 7.5 or 6.5 last year, 11 touchdowns, 6 picks. His longest was 87. So completion-wise, he's gotten better because but then again, he didn't throw as many passes as he did in 2018. So really, the numbers are just kind of up and down. And whereas these 6 games are going to be huge, especially for a guy like him who did have 2018. It's going to be really interesting to see what he can do with that squad and how they've taken this extra time leading up to the season to prepare him.
Sure, I think. I'm looking at the matchup predictor from ESPN right now. 79.4% in favor of Western Michigan over Akron to kick off action. I think that's really generous for Akron. I think you're giving Akron 20.6% chance. The only way, and this is the only way I could see Akron pulling this upset, Western Michigan has November 11th circled on their calendar. They play Toledo. That's become a big rivalry in the last couple of years. The only way I see Akron pulling this upset is if Western Michigan is looking ahead. I don't think they are, given that it's a 6-game season, but that is, in my mind, the only possible way Western Michigan loses this game.
Yeah. And, you know, we talked so much about, you know, why Akron's offense, lack thereof. We go over to the other side of the ball in Western. Wasnik threw for 3,000 yards last year. Bellamy ran for 1,400, and Moore received. He caught 802 passing yards. So I mean, really, there's a lot of production on that offensive side of the ball. So we'll carry over this year. I think what time will tell, but it's going to be interesting too. This is only 6 games. How much these guys? I'm kind of curious to see kind of how big their playbook is, because every game does matter. So are they going to open up the playbook and just go to everything they can possibly find, or stick with what they know? It's going to be really interesting to see what these guys do. All right, so we move on here from that game. We're going to go to Buffalo and Northern Illinois. That's, of course, 7 o'clock on ESPN2 on Wednesday. Speaking of matchup predictors, this one's interesting too. Buffalo, 61.2% favorite over Northern Illinois, who's been fairly down the past couple of years. You know, they ended last year, the last 5, winning 3 out of 5. But like I said, they have a tough schedule. They really do. For some reason, Northern's always one of those teams who draws a big-time Power 5 school to start the year off. You know, like they had to go to Utah last year. Utah was pretty good. So they're one of those teams who always has a top Power 5 school to start the year. When we look at their record here, they finished the year 5-7. And, you know, with losses at Nebraska, too, and at Vanderbilt, at Utah. They beat Illinois State. So you look at those Power 5 schools there, those 3 back-to-back-to-back, 35-17, 44-8, 24-18. That's tough for anybody.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think Northern Illinois, this one's an interesting one, right? You know, this is a school who, for a majority of the 2010s, dominated the MAC. I think they won something like 4 MAC championships in the last decade, made it to a BCS game, you know, had a Heisman Trophy finalist. I think that was more of a hey, we're going to throw you a bone kind of thing, but still it counts, right? It counts. It's great prestige for the school. It's great prestige for the MAC. I think I'm going to have to agree with Zach from the discussion earlier. Buffalo's a good team this year. Buffalo looks solid top to bottom. And if you really sit here and look at it, you know, last year, sure, their passing yards weren't there, but they were top 10 in the country in rushing yards, 250 rushing yards a game. I can't imagine where they don't replicate that this year. I mean, you know, they had, you know, Jarrett Patterson leading the way. He's coming back. This is his junior year rather. And I mean, that kid's a stud. He was easily the best running back in the MAC last year. Save Bellamy out of Western Michigan. Bellamy's now playing with the Denver Broncos. I think there's some hope for this Jarrett Patterson kid. So I don't know. I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens with Buffalo. If they can get the ground game going early, I think this is a game they could probably run away with. I think Northern Illinois, you know, they really struggled last year. Doesn't mean that they're out of the running with a shortened season. But you got to bring your best game every single week. In MAC play, I feel like if you drop one game normally, you're probably okay. This season, you can't afford. I'm going to imagine we're going to have 2 6-0 teams playing in the MAC championship. We can talk about that later, but that's going to be my guess.
So I, like you mentioned, Jarrett Patterson's a star. They also got a superstar in waiting, I think, in Kevin Marks behind him. So with this weird schedule and whatnot, I think you see a lot more of him because they're obviously Jared Patterson's coming to his senior year and they kind of want to give Marks more confidence. So I see him being used a lot. And then defensively, number one in points per game on a defensive basis, number one in sacks in the MAC last year, fourth in interception, and they have their top rusher coming back. They have a solid secondary coming back. Like this Buffalo team, top to bottom, whether offensively with their RPO and their just dominant defense, like I agree with you, Zach, earlier, how you mentioned that they should be the favorite, because I think this team, top to bottom, depth-wise, is just
Yeah, and something that I was thinking about the other day, like thinking about how weird this whole season has been, right? There's no spring practice now, an abbreviated fall camp, and now we're having this shortened 6-game season. I think that the teams that are going to perform the best this year are going to be teams that have a lot of talent returning, that have upperclassmen, and that have continuity in their coaching staffs, because I think that familiarity that they have you have in those situations helps make up for some of the lost time we've had throughout the offseason. Now, I think Buffalo definitely fits in that category. You got Leipold coming back. I think now he's in his fifth or sixth year, if I'm not mistaken. Then you have you got 15 starters back, 8 on defense, 7 on offense. So you have a lot of roster continuity with Buffalo. On the other side of the ball with Northern Illinois, you can't say the same thing for them. I mean, this is a team had a ton of turnover this offseason. I was reading one of the Northern Illinois season preview articles on HustleBelt written by one of our contributors, Dave Drury. And there's a stat he had in this article that astounded me, that I couldn't even believe it. 93 players are listed on the roster for Northern Illinois right now. 62 of them are freshmen. 62 out of 93 players on the roster are freshmen right now. Think about that. Think about how insane that is. So I just think that this season, fortunately or unfortunately for Northern Illinois, is, you can kind of look at it as a free season, a developmental season for some of these young guys that they have on their roster. And hopefully that will pay dividends for them next year. But if I'm being honest with you guys, I think this could be a rough year for the Huskies.
Yeah, it really will. And when you look at the grand scheme of things, from Alex talked about running the 2010s. Rod Carey built one hell of a program there. He was guys like Jordan Lynch, those diamonds in the roughs that you would never really recruit, because if you look at his stats, he was more of a running back style quarterback than he was a passer. And so in 2013, of course, Sam, this is before you got to Muncie, but Brady Hoke paid for 200 Ball State students to take a road trip from Muncie to DeKalb for the Ball State Northern Illinois game when we were both on top of our divisions. So we got to travel up there. I got to see Jordan Lynch live on a Wednesday night or whatever it was, and this kid was the real deal. And our defense was stout with Eric Patterson, rest in peace, Newsome, Nate Ollie was on that team, and so many solid football players. And Keith Wenning, Willie Snead, Jawan Edwards, and that was an incredible game, but just got away from Ball State late, a couple late picks, kind of forcing the ball. But when we talk about dominating 2010s, Northern Illinois did a great job of that, going to a BCS. I got to see what that BCS money did for their facilities. They have probably the best facilities in the MAC conference. I mean, I've seen a lot of them, and I'm pretty sure Northern Illinois has some of the best, if not the best. From what that, not only did they get that Chicago money, but that BCS money did an incredible job with their program. But yeah, they're a team, I think, having so many freshmen, let those guys get settled in, let them play. And I think, we saw this past week with Ohio State, they put a freshman quarterback in there. Just those game reps do count. So I'm really curious to see how many freshmen actually do play this year. Because if you're a coach with a young team, you can look at it as this year, yes, you want to win, but you look at an opportunity, yes, it's 6 games, so you can get these guys game experience where you can't get that anywhere else. And it's only 6 games. So, you really take this time and use it valuably to build your season, or build your team for the following years to come.
Not at all. Yeah, it's I think just by virtue of drawing Buffalo as your crossover matchup, that's unlucky in itself. And then, the West is going to be so close. It's crazy. I think there's 4 teams in that division that could win it, and so that's going to be that doesn't do Northern Illinois any favors there either.
Yeah, I didn't realize the roster was that young. That's a mind-blowing stat. If you want to talk stats, that's one for you guys to tuck in your hat for trivia night. Wow, that's I had no idea. I mean, I think they're going to get at least some consistency from Ross Bowers at quarterback. But even then, last year he threw 7 touchdowns through 8 picks. The offensive line, they let opposing defenses get to him 18 times. Like, it's just this is not a team who I think has it all together as of right now. Not to say that they won't get it figured out, and coaching plays a big part of that. I'm sure their coaches at Northern Illinois were not happy with the results from last season. I mean, if you're a coach at a MAC school that's been in recent memory historically dominant, you're not happy with a 5-7 season. So I'm sure that the coaches are doing something to retool and get these guys ready. But I'm with you. When 60% of the roster's freshmen, you're in for a long season, because these aren't going to be 4- and 5-star players like you would get it on Ohio State, an Alabama, a Michigan, whatever. No, these are going to be the 2- and 3-star guys that the MAC is used to getting. I'm with you. That's going to be a rough season.
Yeah, and looking at their schedule this season, it doesn't get much rougher to start out with. You do get home games, but it's against Buffalo, Central Michigan, away at Ball State and Western Michigan, home at Toledo, and away at Eastern Michigan. For a team that's coming with that many freshmen, their schedule isn't doing that many favors. And when we talk about Buffalo being the favorites, the Toledo is apparently the MAC West favorite.
Yeah.
That's not difficult. I think Central Michigan was projected 3rd. So for a team that has that many that unexperienced, this schedule isn't doing them any favors.
It's interesting. AJ likes to talk about getting to see Jordan Lynch play live. I got to see him, I think it was either the week before or the week after, play live in Toledo. And everything that you hear about him leading up to your contest with him, he was the real deal. That kid knew football in such a way, and he just had such a level head on his shoulders when he was playing. I mean, he had passing touchdowns, rushing touchdowns in the Toledo game. Watching him, he would taunt the student section. We'd be yelling at him. He'd be like, all right, come on. And he was having fun with it. And that's just one of those diamonds in the rough that Northern Illinois doesn't have this year. They just, this is a team who's got a lot of potential talent, but with this many freshmen, it's just somebody's going to have to step up if they want to be competitive in the division.
No, it really doesn't here. We'll kind of move on here. We've got Ohio and Central Michigan here also. Ohio's coming off a bowl win. They beat Nevada in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, 30-21. They finished the year 7-6. Central comes into this game. Let's see if I pull my Wi-Fi's here a little slow. Let's see here. Do you guys have their numbers? Oh, never mind.
They lost their bowl game, the New Mexico Bowl, to San Diego State, 48-11. In a game that they really had no business being in with San Diego State.
No, they lost. They finished the year 8-6. But looking at their non-conference schedule last year, at Wisconsin, at Miami, that's tough. I mean, no matter who you are, they played Albany too. Their week 1, they beat them 38-21, but they lost to Wisconsin 61-0. And they played Miami very close. 17-12 was that final. Then they went on to beat New Mexico State. They had them late or in the middle of the year. But, look at their schedule from last year. They probably had one of the tougher schedules, if not the toughest schedule in the MAC, when you include that non-conference schedule. So really, Central Michigan is one of those teams too who they like I said, finishing last year 8-6. I can see them still potentially being at the top, one of those top contending teams here when this year's all over.
Yeah,
I think before you go, Alex, but I think the one issue I have with Central Michigan, and I get why the hype's so high, because Jim McElwain is Jim McElwain, and I don't think there's any disagreement that he's a really good head coach. It's that they don't have their quarterback situation figured out. They want David Moore, I believe, Zach. We talked with the CMU guy, and I think David Moore is presumed to be the starter, but he hasn't been cleared by the NCAA.
Yeah.
So, and I'm reading an article right now that says they're waiting a couple weeks. A decision is expected in a couple weeks from October 21st. So, who knows when he's going to be reinstated? So, right now they don't really know what direction they're headed, and I think that's scary for any team. You're in a shortened season already, like. I don't know. This Central Michigan team, I don't think is going to be as good as people think it is just for that reason.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, they lose Quentin Dormady, who, I mean, he did a phenomenal job for him last year. Phenomenal. He did an okay job. He went 14-9 touchdown to interception ratio. He had, 2,300 yards. This is the chance for David Moore to kind of, if he gets cleared by the NCAA, this is a chance for him to come in and kind of say, all right, I have some reps. He had 1,100 yards last year, 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. This is a kid who can play ball, but if it's not David Moore, who is, like you said, the presumed starter, who they're just waiting on the NCAA, you've got Tommy Lazzaro as the next man up. Or then Daniel Richardson. Like, you don't have somebody who has real live experience. And in a season that every single game matters more than ever, having a guy who has a little bit of experience like a David Moore is so critical. And I think, unfortunately, if he does not get the okay, you're looking at Tommy Lazzaro as your starter, who had 8 pass attempts in his career at Central Michigan. Yikes. That's rough. Not the way to break in a quarterback.
And it's so unfortunate too for Central Michigan, because I think that if David Moore were to get cleared and be able to play, I think they could potentially win the conference. I think David Moore started the first 4 games last year, and he was really good. I mean, there was a reason why he was the starter instead of Quentin Dormady at the beginning of the year last year. He was really good at the beginning of the season last season. The last game he played was when they played Miami, Florida, down in Miami. They gave him everything they could handle. They lost 17-12. And he had 200 yards. He didn't have his best game of the season that day. But he still makes some throws, and you watch his highlight tape. I mean, the dude was athletic. He can get out of the pocket. He can run when the play breaks down, and he has a rocket for an arm too. So I think if he was playing, man, Central Michigan would be tough to deal with. But without him on the field, I don't think they're the same team. I could see, on the other sideline, you have Frank Solich for Ohio. So, I mean, that's Ohio over the last 10, 15 years with him at the helm has just become like a model of consistency in the MAC. They're going to win 7 or 8 games every year. Every once in a while, they'll win 9. But they're going to run the ball. They're going to play defense. They're in the top 2 or 3 in rushing yards every year in the conference. And I think with the questions that Central Michigan has at quarterback, I agree with you, Sam. I think they could, be due for maybe a little bit of a step back here until they get that resolved. I could see Ohio going into Mount Pleasant and pulling one out here.
Yeah, and I think this is interesting. I just pulled up this article from the Post and the postathens.com, who they haven't even figured out who their quarterback is going to be. It's between Curtis Rourke, who's obviously the brother of Nathan Rourke, and who they just brought in Armani Rogers. So it's basically 2 teams who don't know their quarterback situation moving forward. I think Armani Rogers, to me, is the guy who I would trust. He has experience. He's a graduate senior. He played 3 years at, I believe, UNLV before transferring over. I think he would fit Solich's offense really well. You could give Curtis Rourke another year to kind of rest and redshirt and just like learn from him in this weird season. And then next year, hopefully you'll have a 12 game season, be able to plug him in there. But yeah, I think Solich in this matchup of really unknown quarterback battles, given the consistency, as you mentioned, is kind of gives me the edge in my mind between these 2 teams.
I think that's going to be, I mean, it's going to be really interesting. Obviously, Ohio loses Nathan Rourke. That's a big loss at quarterback. Guy had almost 3,000 yards for his senior year. He had 20 touchdowns to only 5 picks. That's big. For me, I think if David Moore doesn't get cleared for Central, this is going to be the tale of who can break their quarterback in the quickest. Because you've got Joe Mishler, you've got Drew Kesey for Ohio, who have both attempted 3 or less passes at Ohio. And I'm sure they were either garbage time or, hey, we've got to pull Nathan Rourke off because of a helmet, like something, mundane, something really small. And so it's who's gonna be the guy who's more prepared. Is it going to be Joe Mishler or is it going to be, Tommy Lazzaro? That's a big storyline to keep an eye on if David Moore is not able to play. I think that's a very critical storyline, actually, and could really shape the season for both teams. Like you mentioned, Zach, Central Michigan could probably win the West, probably win the conference. David Moore's playing. I don't disagree with you at all. If they go another route, they could be at the bottom of the conference. They could be at least at the bottom of the division, hanging out with Northern Illinois. Now, obviously, they have other quality pieces. The defense is pretty solid. I mean, they still won 8 games last year, made it to the MAC championship. I mean, the MAC's not everybody wants to talk about, oh, the MAC's so easy to win, blah, blah, blah. No, I mean, you drop a conference game, like you could be out of the running. You drop 2, you're definitely out of the running. It's some of these other conferences, you can drop 3 conference games and you're still okay. In the MAC, you can't afford to drop more than 2. Really, you can't afford to drop more than 1. And so I think this is going to be a really, really critical first game for both of these squads. It looks like they do have Central Michigan favored. But I like Frank Solich. I model of consistency. That's the best way to describe him and his coaching career at Ohio. He's just so good at putting quality on the field. He's a great recruiter. He gets the players he wants to build the system he wants. You look at what they've done this year or what they did last year. I mean, they were blowing teams out. I mean, they blew out Bowling Green 66-24, blew out Akron 52-3. And even in their bowl game against Nevada, they won 30-21. Like the wins that they had were big wins. The losses they had were really close losses, save for Louisiana. And yeah, really, Louisiana was their biggest loss, and that was a 20-point loss. Louisiana went on to win the Conference USA. So I think Sun Belt. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you look at them, and Ohio's always going to show up. They're always going to play tough. They're going to make you earn that win. And again, this is going to be who can break in their quarterback the best. I think that's the storyline for this game.
Yeah, so like I said, Ohio's kind of one of those teams. You look at Frank Solich, it's old school pound and ground. I think back to a couple of years ago, they had Blankenship back there, running back. The dude was a bowling ball and could not be tackled. He was probably one of the most. He was the Jordan Lynch of that time period of MAC football, and the kid was just incredible. It was so fun to watch, and those guys are the best to watch, I think, when it comes to MAC football. So we're gonna move on from those 2 teams. We're gonna move on to the last game of the schedule. BG and Toledo battle for I-75. Toledo's coming off a 6-6 year. They did not make a bowl game, and BG comes in 3-9 off of 3 and yeah, you should be off a 3-9 season. Or they beat Toledo. They beat them 20-7. So Alex, we'll let you take the lead on this one. You live in this world, wearing a Toledo jersey right now. So you take the head on this, man.
This game is Christmas to me as long as Toledo wins. Toledo has won 9 out of the last 10 years. Prior to last year, the last time Toledo lost, Owl City's Fireflies was the number 1 song in the U.S. That's a fun fact for you guys. So, that being said, there was a lot of hype last year with this Toledo team. They had a really successful campaign the year before. just not fresh off a MAC championship, but 2 years removed from it. There's a lot of hope that Mitchell Guadagni could take them back to the MAC championship, maybe have a nice little run. They started the season really well too. I mean, with a win over BYU, winning at Colorado State last year, this Toledo team looked to be the real deal last year to start the season. They lost a close one at Kentucky, a 2-score game that was a lot closer than the score indicated. They blew out Murray State. Colorado State on the last second score. Brigham Young came to town, returned Toledo the win that they should have had a few years ago out in Utah. I was at that game actually, and that was a firework of a game. You had guys like Kareem Hunt playing in that game, Deontay Johnson. That was a great game. But yeah, Toledo started the season off 4-1, looking poised to take control of the MAC West once more and run the table. Then everything fell off. Mitchell Guadagni got hurt against Bowling Green. They lost 20-7. Mitchell Guadagni was out again the next week, where they played at Ball State, lost 52-14. They recovered a little bit with Eli Peters taking over, winning against Eastern in overtime, then beating Kent State. Peters finished out the season. They lost to Northern Illinois by a field goal, lost to Buffalo, and then got blown out by Central. The biggest issue with Toledo last year was inconsistency at quarterback. Not because of inconsistent play, it was because of inconsistency because of injuries. There was, for whatever reason, if you looked at the Toledo quarterbacks the wrong way, they were out for 3 weeks. That was really the tale of, Mitchell Guadagni. Now, I'm very glad that this experiment with him is over because he was much more – I often talk to people about it. They tried to make him like Jordan Lynch, and he wasn't a Jordan Lynch. He was definitely more of I need to throw it and use my ability to move my feet as a secondary option. They wanted to run him a lot more. Just watching those games and watching how those plays developed, they really wanted to push him and make him run. Now, you've got a great backfield. With Brian Koback coming back to Toledo. I mean, this is an offense that's stacked. I think last year the loss of like Deontay Johnson and Cody Thompson and, some of those guys, that really sucked. But this is a team who offensively has a lot of firepower. Defense was a killer for Toledo last year. When the offense couldn't get going, the defense just said, cool, we're gonna let people in. And that is when they went out and hired the former Mount Union head coach and said, hey, we need a guy who knows defense. Come on in. And, now he's coaching his first Division I gig. This is a guy who had how many national championships under his belt at D3 Mount Union? Everybody talks about Mount Union as a true power in college football. And you can't argue that. Vince and Larry, between the two of them, had, something ridiculous like 16 national championships in the last 25 years. That's a dynasty. I don't care who you are. That's a dynasty. And so I know Toledo completely retooled on defense in terms of their staff. I'm excited for this one because Toledo's coming into this game with a chip on their shoulder. Bowling Green, they're riding high. They're like, hey, we beat them last year. They came to our place. We showed them what's up. They don't have some of those key playmakers like Grant Loy. That was critical for them last year. Grant Loy had some good feet. That kid could move. He could throw the ball. They don't have him anymore. They've got Darius Wade now under center. I think that this is a team who now they have the second year with their new coach, Jason Candle on the other side for Toledo. I think that this is going to be a much better game than last year's was. And I really do think that Toledo comes out on top. I'm not just saying that because I'm wearing the blue and gold, but I do believe that this is a game Toledo comes out on top. I think experience plays a critical factor. Again, weird offseason, weird preparation time, but I really do think that Toledo has far more experience in a lot more areas than Bowling Green. Anything can happen in a rivalry game, as we saw last year.
I will say though, are you not at all worried? I believe Jason Candle was one of the few FBS coaches to test positive. I'm correct in this,
yes.
right? Yeah.
I'm not worried because it happened so long ago. That's been now 4 or 5 weeks.
Okay.
No, that's been 98 days ago, according to you.
Okay, then never mind. I thought that was a lot recent than I
That
remember.
was that
but-
was even before the MAC said, sure, we'll come back and play. So I'm not worried about it. I'm glad it's funny. Jason Candle tested positive, and then a couple weeks ago, Todd Kowalczyk, the basketball coach at Toledo, tested positive. So I need to just get out of Toledo for a few days. I think that's what needs to happen. But no, I think Jason Candle testing positive doesn't affect this team. I think I think Toledo's coming in with a chip on their shoulder as well. They had a player was tragically killed in Toledo in the off season. And I think that that's going to be kind of a motivating thing for them too. It's like, hey, this is a brother of the team. We're going to move forward. We're going to kind of lift this banner as Go Rockets in honor of him. And I think they're going to, some of those players who are close to that player are going to play for him. And I think that's going to show. I think there's going to be a lot of emotion in this game. Bowling Green Toledo typically happens towards the end of the season with how they've switched up things with the MAC. It's happening closer to the beginning. Having it happen as the very first game, emotions are riding high. And I think that's the thing right here, right? Is the team that wins this game gets such a huge boost to momentum because now you've beaten your number one rival. You've now, if you're Toledo, you've bounced back and you've beaten your rival. You're on a good path. If you're Bowling Green, you've done it 2 years in a row, something you haven't done in a long time, something you haven't done it over a decade. Either way, whoever wins this game, you get a lot of momentum going forward that could propel you towards a really successful season, even potentially making a bowl game, depending on how that works out. So I really think that this first game is so critical for both programs. I do think Toledo takes it. They are currently projected at an 85%. It's a rivalry game. Numbers don't matter. It's a rivalry game. That's every single rival every rivalry game this happens. Numbers don't matter. I think Toledo takes it. They're at home. They're not going to want to lose in the Glass Bowl. This one is really Toledo's game to lose, I think, solely based off of experience, preparation, and guys coming back.
Yeah, Alex, I tend to agree with you. I think Toledo just still has a lot more talent at this point than Bowling Green does. I think Scott Loeffler had the second ranked recruiting class led in the MAC last year, which I think surprised a lot of people. And I think he's going to, build Bowling Green back to a point where they're competitive again. I don't think they're there quite yet. I think from like a matchup perspective in this game too, I just don't think this is a good matchup for Bowling Green. You mentioned a couple minutes ago, Alex, the run game for Toledo. They got Brian Kovac coming back. You got, pretty much the whole O-line back. I think 4 starters on the O-line is back. If I'm not mistaken, 3 or 4 starters on the O-line back, if I'm not mistaken. And then if you look at Bowling Green, this team was last in the conference in rush defense last year. They gave up 272 yards per game on the ground in conference play. So I think from a matchup perspective, that does not look good for Bowling Green. They're still very young on the defensive side of the ball. So I just think from a matchup perspective and from a talent perspective, I think Toledo wins this one also with the motivation of, remembering the loss from last year. I will say, though, that, when Sam and I, when we did our East Division preview on our show last week, I did pick Bowling Green as a team that we think that I think could outperform expectations this year. I think they're on the right track.
I didn't.
And I think no offense to the Rockets. Hey, I just picked Toledo to win. So we're
you made up for it. Thank you.
You're giving a taker, yeah. But no, I think they have Matt McDonald coming in as a transfer as their quarterback this year. He sat out last season. He transferred from Boston College whenever Scott Loeffler was named the head coach at Bowling Green. So he sat out last year, but he knows Loeffler's system. He was in it for a year at Boston College, and he was in it. Obviously, he practiced with the team last year. So he's really in his 3rd year of this system. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to be a huge boost for them. This is a team on offense last year that, they couldn't throw the ball. They were 11th in the conference in passing yards, 154 passing yards per game. And that is just so unlike Bowling Green. When I think a lot of people think about Bowling Green, they think about Dino Babers and Matt Johnson, throwing for 550 yards a game and 6 touchdowns. And Bowling Green last year just couldn't do that because they didn't have the right players in place in the system. Andrew Clare is back as a senior. He's a good running back. I think he's a little bit underappreciated. So there's some pieces here. I think Bowling Green's moving in the right direction. I just, I don't see them winning this game, unfortunately, just from a matchup perspective.
I am contractually obligated to say, fuck Bowling Green. So that's my one expletive I get to say.
I noticed on Twitter before AJ goes that the Bowling Green Toledo thing, I think me and Zach still, even with this quarantine, is still alive. Like we got a couple like F Toledos essentially. So like that, that rivalry is still alive.
There's some heat there. I like it.
It's a mini Ohio State Michigan. It's the in-state Ohio State Michigan. I think it really is. I think it's the Ohio State Michigan of the MAC.
You know what? What this has made me realize is that someday, whenever life returns to quote unquote normal, I need to attend a Bowling Green Toledo game. I need to see it live.
I'll make sure that you do it at the Glass Bowl. It's the Glass Bowl special.
Cool.
Zach, you brought up some old BGQBs there for a second, and I had two pop into mind. Omar Jacobs.
Yeah.
He was electric to watch.
Yeah, he was.
He and Josh Harris, too.
Yep.
Those two dudes were so fun to watch.
Go way back. Oh, for sure. Yeah, that was like –
I look up the years that they were there, and that's 06 and 04.
Yeah.
So, like, those dudes were so fun to watch, and that was an interesting time in the MAC as a whole because you're coming off 3 years of Ben Roethlisberger in 03 when he was drafted. It was just – throw the ball and whoever comes down with it comes down with it. Yeah, and that's kind of how the MAC ran at that time, and it was so fun to watch. So as we close up the show here, Vegas hasn't released the odds yet to these games. They probably will this weekend, I'd imagine. I'm going to go down the list here. We'll start with Zach. Tell me who wins and by how much. So we're going to start off with Ball State, Miami.
I'm going to go, Sam, I know you don't have a ton of confidence in the Cardinals here in week one, but I'm going to take Ball State. I think I would be willing to bet that when the lines come out, I'm going to guess Ball State's going to be an underdog in this game. So that might be a little bit of a contrarian pick. I'd say, I don't know, Miami might be favored. I don't know, maybe a field goal or, 4 or 5. I don't know, something like that. But I'm going to take the Cardinals. I just think Drew Plitt, they have so much talent back on offense. Caleb Huntley, and even defense as well. I just think Miami, their offense, even with Gabbert, it doesn't scare me. Their defense, I have some concerns. I think Ball State wins this one. I'm gonna go Ball State 34-27.
Nope.
All right, Stan, what do you think?
I was gonna go with Miami, Ohio, but then I got on Twitter and I kind of got mad. And me and a couple of my friends were doing predictions, and they had Ball State going 0-6. So you know what? I'm going to say Ball State by a touchdown. Let's go Ball State. Let's say 20. Let's go Ball State 31, Miami, Ohio 24. Let's do that.
Alex?
I think it's my turn. So I think Miami's going to come in riding really high off of, everything that they accomplished last year, beating Central Michigan in the MAC championship. I think that they're going to come in a little bit energetic, ready to go. I think Ball State's going to come out flat, but Ball State's going to play a great second half. I think Ball State comes and wins this by a field goal. I'm going to go 27-24 Ball State. Chirp, chirp.
Mm-hmm. And I'll be a homer here. I have no problem with that. I was going to pick Ball State 17-14. I think it's a low-scoring game. I think, honest to God, I think punters probably get a lot of work in, especially not just this game, but I think across the board this week. I think punters get a lot of work. But, yeah, I'm going to take Ball State 17-14. We'll move down the list. Zach, we'll go back to you. Eastern and Kent. The game's at Kent. Not that it really matters, not that there's fans or anything, but,
Yeah, I think this is one. I think this is a game that Kent wins by multiple touchdowns. There's just Eastern Michigan loses so much from last year. Mike Glass at quarterback. I mean, he was their whole offense last year. And then we talked about when we broke this game down a little bit earlier. Their strength. One of their strengths of their defense last year was their secondary. They had 3 All-MAC performers in the secondary last year. All 3 of them are gone. I think Dustin Crum's going to be able to take advantage of that secondary. I think Kent State's defense, even though it was their weakness last year, their defense was not good by any metric. I think Eastern Michigan's going to struggle significantly on offense this year. So I think, Eastern Michigan could get a touchdown or two, but I just think the matchups all favor Kent State here. Plus, it's a home game. I know, like you said, AJ, no fans or anything, but there's still something to be said for having to go on the road and, you travel there overnight, spend in a hotel, an uncommon locker room, all that stuff. So I'm going to go Kent State by, I'll say Kent State. I'm going to go 41-24 Kent State.
I'll go.
Yeah, Sam?
I'll go. I'm sticking with the same thing as you. I think Kent State's just going to light up Eastern Michigan. I'm going to go with a simple one. I think it's by 2 scores. Kent State 27, Eastern Michigan 14.
Alex?
I think Eastern lost a lot on offense. I really do. I think that defensively, Eastern's going to be okay. I think the Eastern's going to show up. They're going to play Kent State a little bit tough. I do think Kent State wins this by 10. I'm going to go 31-21. But I do think Eastern plays them a little bit tougher than what people are expecting. But I am going to tip the cap towards Kent State on this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am too. Looking here at the ESPN Power Football Index, they have Kent State winning at 58.2% to Eastern's 41.8. I'm still going to take Kent State. I'm going to go probably maybe a 28-14. I can't see many of these games being high scoring because the MAC isn't known for high prolific scoring offenses, and especially in a shortened season with everything that's gone on, I can't see it being too crazy here. But yeah, I'll take Kent in that one. I'll move down the list. Zach, we'll go back to you. We got Western at Akron.
I think this one here is going to be a low-scoring game, a very low-scoring game. Akron, we talked about their struggles on offense. Can't run the ball, couldn't throw the ball. They averaged. Akron averaged 8.5 points a game in conference play last year. This was not a good team by any stretch of the imagination. Western Michigan, though, I have some questions about their offense. They lose Wasink last year. Their quarterback. They only have 5 starters back on that side of the ball, so there is a little bit of a rebuilding happening there. So I think Western Michigan's defense is going to be their strength this year, and I think in this game their defense is going to be able to to handle Akron quite easily. However, I do think that with some of the turnover on offense and some of the lack of firepower and what they have to replace, I think it could take Western Michigan a while to get going in this game. I could see Western Michigan winning this one. I'll go I'm going to go maybe 17-3, something like that.
Sam?
I'm gonna go with the low scoring game like you, Zach. I still think Western Michigan gets the win, but I think it's gonna be a closer than a lot of people think. I think Akron just has everything to play for and nothing really to lose this season. So I think they're just gonna surprise a bunch of people. I think Western Michigan's just gonna play down to them a little bit. So I'm gonna go with it's going to be a low-scoring game. I'm going to say they edge them out, surprisingly, 13-10. Western Michigan gets it.
I'm kind of with Sam on this one. Western Michigan's breaking in a new quarterback, Griffin Allstott. I think for me, that's a big critical part of it. Everybody wants to talk about, oh, you got this, you got that. Quarterback's the most important position on the offense. You got your linemen who do their job. You got your receivers, your running backs. The quarterback's your field general. If Griffin is not ready, this game's going to get ugly really quickly. If he is ready, Western could open the floodgates pretty quickly as well. Either way, this is not going to be a pretty game for either team. I do think Western takes the W. I'm going to go a little bit bigger point spread than Sam did. I'm going to go 21-14. But I do think it is in favor of Western, and it's going to be some sloppy offense, some sloppy defense, things we love seeing with action.
Yeah, I'm kind of going to go the same way there. Low scoring, breaking in a new quarterback, breaking in Allstott. Remember, his dad is Mike Allstott, so this kid can play football. He knows how to play. But, coming in, really with the team based around him, I'm going to go low scoring, probably like a 17-14. Put this on the defense, I think. I think that's what a lot of the trend I think is going to be for these MAC schools is defense this week, because there are so many questions when you go down the board about everybody's offense. But everybody has questions about, everybody's quarterback, everybody's running back, who's returning, who's not. Defensively, every team still seems pretty stout, with the exception of maybe Akron. Outside of that, I think every other team's kind of set in stone what they want to do. We're going to go down to probably one of the more intriguing games of the week, actually, Buffalo at Northern Illinois. We were really high on Buffalo here early on. Zach, what do you think wins this, and by how much?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately for Northern Illinois, I think this one could get ugly. I mentioned that stat earlier of how young they are and how inexperienced they are. You look at the other side of the ball at Buffalo, and it's the complete opposite. There's senior leadership, there's continuity, there's a veteran coaching staff. You have 2 1,000-yard rushers coming back for Buffalo, and then on the other side, you got a rush defense that gave up almost 200 yards a game on the ground last year. I don't see how Northern Illinois keeps this game close, unfortunately. I'm going to go in this one. I'm going to go Buffalo 38-10 over the Huskies.
Sam?
Okay, I'm gonna like I'm a big fan of Leipold and what he's done, and I'm still waiting for Hammock to prove himself. So until he proves me otherwise, I'm gonna say Buffalo gets a pretty handily victory like you, Zach. I'm gonna go with 28-7 on this one.
Northern Illinois is not going to score a point.
Wow.
Buffalo wins this one 31-0.
Wow.
I know you guys can say I'm crazy here. I really don't think Northern Illinois looks as good. I mean, all the factors are against them. You mentioned the 60+% of the roster is freshmen. Buffalo's got Jarrett Patterson returning, a guy who's just gonna bruise through literally everybody. I see Buffalo wearing down the Northern Illinois defense, just constantly ground and pound, just moving the ball, milking the clock, just wearing those guys out. Buffalo wins this 31-0. Where's Lee Corso? Let me put on the Buffalo head. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go Buffalo here too. I think they win it pretty handedly, but more of maybe because I think we can't forget too, this is the first game of the year. And we saw it kind of across college football, especially this past week with the Big Ten teams getting off to a slow start. So I think they may get off to a slow start, but it ends up being maybe a 28-7, 28-3 final. I think I have scoring a little bit lower, but again, first game of the year, we're going to take that maybe 28-3. I think is where I'm going to go there. I'm going to go down the list here. Ohio at Central.
You know what? I think this, along with Ball State, Miami, I think could probably be the best game of week one, the most competitive game of week one. I think this is going to be a good game. I said it earlier. I think it really sucks for not only for Central Michigan, but for fans of the MAC. It really sucks that we're not going to get to see David Moore lead Central Michigan's offense, because I think that really could change things and really would make them, put them in the driver's seat, I think, in this division. But unfortunately, without him, I got to look at the other side here. I think I got to look at Ohio. This is a team that, what you're getting from them every year. I talked earlier how I feel like the teams that are going to perform the best this year are going to be the teams that have continuity and familiarity with each other between the team and the staff. And Ohio has the most veteran coaching staff in the conference. Frank Solich has been there for 15 years now. He's the most winning MAC conference coach of all time. I trust him. I know McElwain's had some good success last year at Central Michigan as well, and I know he's a good coach in his own right. But they just have a lot more question marks to me. I know Ohio is also replacing a quarterback, but they have their 2 best running backs back from last year. A lot of continuity along the O-line, a lot of continuity on the defense. This is a defense that was really good last year, and they got 9 players back on that side of the ball. I think Ohio wins this one. I'm going to go – I think this is going to be another somewhat low-scoring game. I'm going to go Ohio. I'm going to go 21 – I'll go 20-14 Ohio.
Yes, sir.
So, in order not to just us get 4 unanimous votes, I'm going to switch it up because why not? That's the fun of predictions and whatnot. So, I'm going to switch it up. I don't really believe in Central Michigan in this one. David Moore is looking like he's not going to be declared eligible this time. I like what Frank Solich has done, but I'm going to say, even with that, Central Michigan's just going to find a way to win. It's a home game, like Zach said, even though it's not going to be with fans. It's still something to include. There's still some sort of a home field advantage at play. I'm going to say they squeak it out. I'm going to go with a low-scoring game. Both teams trying to figure out their offenses. I'm going to go with a score of 20 to 17 in this one.
You're not allowed to take my scores. No, this one's tough. I think home field advantage does play a small part in this. I'm going to go with Central Michigan in this one. I think that Frank is phenomenal with what he does at OU, but I think Central Michigan squeaks this one out. I think it's going to come down to a missed extra point or a missed 2-point conversion, something like that. I'm going to go 21-20 Central Michigan.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. I'm going Ohio just because I think the momentum coming off a bowl win last year is huge. You look at the picture of Frank Solich getting French fries dumped on him. Like, how is that not a fathead in that locker room? Is beyond me. It has to be. But he's one of those guys too. He's the winningest coach in MAC history. He's been successful everywhere he's went, from Nebraska to OU, everywhere in between, everything. But I'm still going to go Ohio. But again, low scoring, maybe a 21-17. Maybe down to a field goal type game, because I think defense is what's going to be prominent this week. Offensive production is going to take maybe a game or two to fully get back to where it should be. I'm going to go 21-17 on that game. Final game on the list here: BG at Toledo. Zach, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Toledo does win this game. I think it might be closer than some people would expect. And I also think this could be a high-scoring game. I think of all these games here this weekend, I think this one has a potential for some points. I see you shaking your head, Alex. I hear you. But let's be honest, Alex. Toledo, you struggled a little bit on defense last year. There's some issues there. I think the defense will be better this year, but I also think part of it is that I think Bowling Green is going to be much, much improved on the offensive side of the ball this year. Second year under Scott Loeffler. They got some more size and some more experience on the offensive line. Got a new quarterback in there who knows the system. You got Andrew Clare back. You got Quentin Morris at tight end, who had a great season last year. I think Bowling Green could score some points in this game, but I think Toledo is going to ultimately win. Bowling Green, they've been bad on defense forever. They're going to continue to be bad on defense. I think Toledo's going to score some points here. I could see Toledo getting over 40 in this game. I'm going to say Toledo. I'm going to go Toledo 41-24.
So yeah. So I think Toledo's obviously known for underperforming, and this is a year to especially do it when you're projected either 6-0 or 5-1, considering that they're projected to win the MAC West. MAC West. And then you think about it, this game out of their entire schedule would be the most likely where you say, like, yeah, they underperformed. They lost to BG, but I don't think this is the case this season. I think if they were to lose, it would be to any of the other games, whether it's the Ball State or Central Michigan game. So with that being said, I think Toledo gets it handily done. I don't think they score as many points as Zach said. I'm going to go with a score of, let's say, 31-17 win.
1,000-0. No, in all seriousness, I'm playing Homer here, and I think since we've seen AJ and Sam play Homer a little bit with Ball State, I think I'm afforded this opportunity. So I am going to pick Toledo in this one. I think that over the course of the last decade, Toledo has been picked to win the West several different times. Several different times they've come up short. But one thing that was consistent, beating Bowling Green. Those players understand now that it's been just over a year since they last beat almost 2 years since they last beat Bowling Green. They have that poor taste in their mouth. These seniors who are returning they don't want to be 2-2 against Bowling Green. They understand the importance of this rivalry. They understand the importance of seeing the Battle of I-75 trophy sitting in that locker room. It's great for recruits. It's great for the program. It's great for morale for the team. I think Toledo comes out. You've got Eli Peters under center. I think that he's going to do Eli Peters under center. Sorry. He's going to do some phenomenal things. This kid's tough. He knows how to play football. I really do think Toledo takes this one. I'm going to go Toledo 45. I'll give Bowling Green a few points. I'll spot them some points. I'll go ahead and give Bowling Green 14. So 45-14.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same boat with Toledo. I just think that, with Candle, Toledo's found success with Mount Union guys as their head coach. And so I think that trend does continue. This week I'm going to go 35-14, and I think BG scores a late touchdown to make it that 14 points. But yeah, I'm going to go 35-14 on that game. And, gentlemen, that is it. We have covered the MAC. We are back next week. MACtion starts Wednesday on ESPN and CBS and ESPN Plus, ESPN3, ESPN 88, whatever they want to call it nowadays. Who knows? But MAC is back. We've got Big Ten. Also, Zach, I got to ask you real quick, man. Penn State, Ohio State.
You know what? I don't have much faith after last weekend. I think I'm going to be honest with you. I usually look forward to the Penn State Ohio State game.
Mm-hmm.
This year. I don't know. I think it could get ugly, man. I think you guys could really give it to us. Noah Cain's out for the year now after he hurt his leg. And then we did not look good at all on Saturday against Indiana. Whether or not, whatever you think of that 2-point conversion call in overtime, it shouldn't even have gotten to overtime. You miss a chip shot field goal before halftime, and you have the ball with 1:45 left, and your opponent has one timeout, and you somehow find a way to lose that game.
Yeah. And Clifford was struggling hitting wide open receivers.
Oh my goodness! Every pick he threw. I mean, they were terrible. Yeah. They were terrible picks, and I was kind of lukewarm on him after last season, and it was not a good start to the year for us.
No, and it's so funny you bring that up too, because I got a thing on my time hops today. 3 years ago today, I was at the Ohio State Penn State game with Saquon ran the opening kickoff back.
Yeah,
and by the time I got to my seat, it was already 14-0.
Yeah, man. I remember that game very well. Me and some of my buddies were watching that game with us, and we went up 14-0 within I think the first 3-4 minutes of that game. We were up.
It was, yeah. 'Cause you ran the opening kickoff back. We went 3 and out. Then you guys went right down the field and scored.
Yeah.
And then in the fourth quarter, JT Barrett went 14-14.
Yep.
And just kind of ended it there. But yeah, I was at that game, and
yeah,
I saw the time hop today. I go, hopefully it's been 3 years.
Yeah, but that's crazy.
Nevertheless, MAC is back. I want you guys to plug your podcast real quick so we can get you guys listeners also.
Well, I'll let Zach take it away.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So we are the MAC Bandwagon Podcast, the official podcast of the HustleBelt, the Mid-American Conference blog. So you can check us out at HustleBelt.com. There's, tons of contributors there. Sam and I do some writing there, and there's a lot of other guys that do as well. So we're going to have full coverage of all things MAC here once the football season gets started. As far as the podcast, you can follow us on Twitter. It's at @Mac_bandwagon. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, really anywhere, any podcast platform you can find us. We'd love to have you come listen. And AJ and Alex, thanks so much for having us, guys. This was great.
Yeah, of course. No, honestly, we for our listeners who may not know, we were on their show not too long ago, a little over a month ago, I would say now at this point. And we had a great time having that roundtable with you guys and some of the other guys from some of the other Group of 5 conferences. So we said, hey, let's return the favor. It's our turn. Figured we'd have a little bit of fun, talk some action, talk some football, get excited for next week. We've been waiting all week for Tuesday night, right, guys?
No doubt.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, I'm gonna be in heaven next Wednesday. I'm gonna be firmly planted.
That's right. It is Wednesday this week because of elections.
I'm unfortunately gonna be in my dorm room watching the game. So that's even though it is a away game, but still the following week when we have a home game, I'll still be in my dorm room. Unfortunately,
I'm sure they'll have it on at the Chug or something.
I'm not 21 yet. 4 months to go.
See, I transferred to Ball State when I was already 21, so I got right into it. It was, yeah.
So cool.
That's all we'll say about that.
Well, guys, thank you so much. Zach, Sam, we definitely appreciate you guys joining us tonight. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you get the chance, please follow us on Twitter at College Sport Pod. Our audience is growing ever so slightly every single week, and we definitely appreciate the love and support from all of our listeners, all of our Twitter fans, whatever. If you guys have any content you want to hear from us, please let us know. Shoot us a DM, whatever you guys want to do. You can follow myself on Twitter at SheerDumbLuck. You can find AJ at Roughing55. Definitely love to see you guys follow us, reach out, say, hey, we've got a player you may want to interview. We're going to be continuing our Year of Maction segment sometime next month, looking to get a few more feelers out there, maybe reach out to University of Buffalo, Kent State, got a couple schools that we're working on. So looking to continue our Year of Maction segment. So yeah, guys, did anybody else have anything else they wanted to toss in there tonight?
I'll mention that too. We do. Hopefully, we're working on a few good guests coming up here soon.
Oh yeah.
In the next couple of months, we'll tease that a little bit. We've got some feelers out to some really good people with some great stories. So hopefully, we can get them on here soon, get that taken care of, and get that content to you guys.
For sure. Zach, Sam, anything else from you guys?
Not really. We've got a couple more previews coming this way. What is it, Zach? Ball State and what's the other school?
Ohio. We got Ball State and Ohio this week.
Cool.
Yeah, that's about it though.
Cool, guys.
Yeah.
Make sure you
And
guys
the
check
only
that out.
other thing I would say, guys, again, is just thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it. It's been a long time coming. I know we've been talking about it, so appreciate you guys having us on. It's always fun to talk MAC with some fellow MAC fanatics.
Sure. Well, that's going to do it for us, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
See you.